introduction to phonics. So what is phonics? Phonics is a method of reading instruction that explicitly and systematically teaches decoding and the relationship between print and spoken language. And this is most appropriate for super beginning readers in the early elementary grades, so K through first grade, or for struggling older readers, so even as old as second or third grade, who still don't have that kind of foundational decoding. So the crux of phonics is that it's systematic and explicit instruction. So these are kind of the basic tenets of phonics instruction. It's going to be teaching sound-symbol relationships. There's a clear, logical instructional sequence. The skills start simple and build to more complex. And new skills are always going to be building on existing skills with a review of previous skills taught. Skills targeted are clearly defined, and this type of instruction is very direct, again, very explicit versus kind of vague and abstract. So why do we teach phonics? Phonics is beneficial across socioeconomic status. It really provides a foundation and improves reading and spelling for students in those early elementary grades. It improves comprehension because once you build those decoding skills, students are understanding what they're reading better. Phonics prevents reading difficulties for at-risk students, and it is also effective for students who have reading difficulties. So reading assessment should really be starting as soon as students are entering kindergarten. For those early literacy skills and that continued progress monitoring through first grade. Due to the effectiveness of phonics in those early grades, students should be provided with intervention as soon as reading difficulties are identified so they can get caught up. But overall, all kindergarten through first grade students really should receive phonics instruction in order to build those foundational reading skills, specifically decoding. Some common screeners, as well as some ongoing kind of progress monitoring tools, would be the Tower, the Test of Word Reading Efficiency, the Dibbles Next, the Core Phonics Survey, and the FastBridge Auto Reading and Early Reading Assessments. So phonics and our multilingual learners. Phonics is very, very important for all young students, but it is also very beneficial for our students who are learning English as a second language. Phonics instruction for multilingual students results in stronger decoding and therefore stronger reading comprehension. One criticism of teaching phonics to our multilingual learners is that there's an assumption that they're just low readers because the language piece isn't as evolved. So there is a need for a more holistic instructional approach. So phonics cannot occur in a vacuum with these learners. Phonics must also coincide with deep and rich language skills and comprehension and vocabulary in order for our multilingual learners to really learn the English vocabulary as well as the decoding piece. There are several approaches to phonics instruction. There are what most people think of when they think of phonics, the synthetic phonics approach. And this would be the more systematic and explicit instruction of how to turn letters and letter combinations into phonemes. And this is often involving the use of decodable text. There's analogy phonics, which uses rhyme to identify unfamiliar words. So if students are able to identify a rhyme in a familiar word, they can use then that rhyme to identify words that they're not as familiar with. Analytic phonics is kind of looking at sound symbol relationships in familiar words and then transferring that knowledge to try and decode words that are unfamiliar but have those same sound symbol relationships within the word. And then embedded phonics is probably the least systematic and explicit of all the approaches, And this is kind of a more fluid, students are taught the skills that they may be lacking or skills as needed. And this approach relies more on context and cueing, so less kind of traditional phonics instruction as we would think. The basic tenet of phonics instruction, though, is this model of the teacher, I do it, the teacher does it with the students, we do it, and then the students are given an opportunity to practice the skills independently. There is a very clear scope and sequence of skills for phonics instruction. And again, it starts more simple with your single consonants and short vowels, and then builds into more complex facets of language and decoding. Similarly, the lesson format is very explicit and clear. You start with phonemic awareness activities. You're going to introduce sound and spelling, blending words, build automatic word recognition. Going to apply these skills, whatever skills the focus of the day, to a decodable text where students will be able to practice those skills, and word work for decoding and encoding. So here we have an example of a phonics activity that a teacher may do with a group of students or one-on-one. And this is going to be a picture sort. So the student is going to be asked to identify whether words end in am or an. So the students are going to be given a series of pictures, and they're going to then have to identify what the picture is. And this, the teacher may need to assist with the vocabulary piece if students are struggling to figure out, what a yam is, because that may be an uncommon word for a lot of our students. So the teacher would provide the necessary background knowledge in order for students to understand the words that they're working with. And then the student will be asked to sort the words into the columns that match the sound or the pattern or whatever the skill is for that particular activity. So in this case, in the am column, we have jam, yam, and ram. And then in the other column, we have pan, fan, and ban. So very similar sounding endings of the words, but the students will really have to kind of decipher which is which. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation today. Please take some time to complete the exit ticket and give some feedback. And for next steps, just reflect on the current practice, determine whether there's room for some more work in this area. And here are my references. Thank you and have a great night.